Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Z Lord podcast. Carter's still on sabbatical, so it's me going alone. And you know what? I'm really glad about that because there are some things that I can express wholeheartedly by just sharing without the conversation that happens when two people are together, even two people who love each other very much, like Carter and I do, because we've been married and committed to each other and gone through so much, raising kids and now grandkids and et cetera, 34 years worth. And that makes people have a very deep bond. And I'm speaking to you today as if you were and you are that person, that we have a deep bond. And the deep bond is that we are all one. And I'm not just saying that facetiously. I'm saying that from my life experience. I actually have felt that, and I try to nurture that feeling of interconnectedness because it is my truth, and I've experienced it enough with the height of joy rather than, the dismay and the arguments that some people put up. And so I know that when the energy is flowing between souls, which we are, we people have souls. We're not just, automatons. I mean, everything has a soul. A flower has a soul. A soul is consciousness. A soul is aliveness. A soul is, there's a reason why we're here. Whether it's a rock or a pebble from outer space that just happened to fall on this planet with a meteor, or an organism that evolved like a flea on a cat or a snail traveling on a garden leaf. We are all here for a purpose. And I'm sure many of you have given that some thought. And in this day and age, there's a lot of reason for thinking a little more about that. So let's go deeper into that interconnectedness, that spiritual side of life. Because there are so many people right now who are disturbed, not just in America, worldwide. There's a lot of conflict. This is a time of challenge. And I truly believe that if a person, a human being who has choices, has not made an effort to nurture their spiritual life, and by that I mean giving your soul just as much attention as that body of yours and that mind of yours, just as much attention, then I think it's going to be a very uncomfortable time for the people who have chosen not to nurture that particular side of their beingness. So I can use a couple of examples. I don't like to use parables or stories that are coming from other people. I just like to use my own experiences when I share about my ideas. Because there are so many people who talk on podcasts or, teaching situations. And I'm not a teacher. I'm just a learner, just like everybody else. But they make references to stories that people can look up and verify. And, oh, yeah, that story came from that book or that author or that well-known prophet or speaker. But I have so many life experiences that have taught me the lessons that, I first started reading about or hearing about from other people. And then I gathered up my own stories, as we all do. So here I use my own experiences, not anybody else's, and no historical references. So earlier in my life, I had a lot of questions about what's going on in this culture of humanity, this blended family that we are worldwide. Whether you think of it that way or not, we are all in one human family. And we're also very different, just like as if you had siblings. I mean, how different are the siblings that come out of a family? They're pretty dang different. And mine And a lot of other families I see, you can barely tell except for facial features. They might have similar noses, similar mouths, ears, etc., structures of their cheekbones, but their personalities and their preferences are radically different. And people who come from families that have a lot of differences learn early on in life, once they get past the teenage years, those difficult times, that acceptance of each other is how they can have a harmonious Thanksgiving dinner or a gathering at any festival or birthday or celebration, Christmas, whatever, Easter, whatever, a wedding. I mean, to make families with different personalities and different purposes of living come together in harmony and joy so that everybody has a good time. Just look at one family. They all have to accept each other's weirdnesses, each other's idiosyncrasies, or their peculiarities, what's important to them. It could be radically different to what's important to me or to you. But in order to get along with our family, we do practice acceptance. And so what is our commonality in our small little blood family or adopted family or family of preference or a tribe, however you want to think of your immediate circle? It is not just only acceptance, but it's looking for the higher things that we can share, that we can enjoy together. Not the lower things. I don't mean the things that take us into those realms of feeling we have to defend our opinions and getting into defending ourselves and bringing up points like why we're right and you're wrong. That's low energy stuff. I'm talking about the higher realms where we can enjoy the nature, the beauty, a smile on a child's face, the joy of succeeding in life, getting a diploma, winning against cancer, etc., etc. Those high points in life where we can celebrate together, and it's accelerated. Our feeling of joy gets accelerated when we share that with another human being, whether it's our close friend or our family member, and in this particular case, even a stranger I'm talking about, because there's a lot of people right now who need comfort, who need to know that everything is happening for a reason, that there is a divine plan unfolding that we did not go to the polls for. But yes, we are in the midst of a sea change that is a result of sometimes people going to vote. Those who voted, thank you very much. I myself make sure I vote, and I make sure I have a voice. And anybody who did not vote, shame on you. Get out there and vote next time. And so there was a time in my life when I did not vote. I had to leave America because I was so distraught about what was going on. This was during the Vietnam era, and actually the end of the Vietnam era, and there was a lot of civil unrest, and the civil rights had barely just squeaked by, and I was a student in Boston, and I was embroiled in protest and really feeling the angst of society not being aware enough, progressive enough. And so I left America, and I went to live in the third world. At that time, the West Indies was very third world. It has now become not so much a third world. A lot of places are like Costa Rica going through its changes. It was third world when I visited it in the early 70s. And now I would say that Costa Rica is not quite first world, but it's second world. It's not third world. These degrees of civilization, like how many theaters do you have in a city, and how many people do you have that are eating consciously and not smoking and drinking themselves to death. that kind of stuff. And do we have industry? And do we have a means to get out of poverty? Because when I left the States in the early 70s because of feeling unrest about what was going on politically, I went to the most impoverished place I could find. At that point, it was Dominica. And Dominica had very little organized commerce. And I went there with a partner, and we helped organize farmers. And I call them peasant farmers because each individual farmer had their own little plot on a hillside, rather than these big plantations that the flatter islands like Barbados and St. Vincent's and places where they had flat lands where they could raise sugarcane and other crops en masse. But in Dominica, which is mostly volcanic, that was not possible. They barely even eked out an airport runway. And that's a real problem when you don't have flat land. The airport landing can be very dangerous and scary and just small planes. So I wanted to experience that. I wanted to live in places where people talked about their chickens, their goats, how the sky was, things that were not embroiled in controversy and partisanship, and how you voted and what political party you were aligned to. So I know what it's like to live like that. I know what it's like to live without politics being at the center, the very core of my being. And I grew to trust nature, that nature has a way of showing us the balance in life, the destruction and the creation, the destruction and the creation. When hurricanes come and destroy whole villages and wipes out like hundreds of people in a landslide because of the rains just washing away the mud, that's tragic. And it happens in civilized countries too. We know that from what happened to places like North Carolina in this last hurricane, Helene. I mean, it's just tragic what nature does. But we don't say that nature is evil. We don't call nature a Marxist because it gives a three-fingered salute or a two-fingered or whatever. And from its emotions, it destroys, it destructs, because that's what nature does. And then, guess what? The seeds grow, the people have perished, and new people are born, and tragedy gets absorbed into the larger picture. And we always remember the horrificness of those storms, of those events, of those wars, of those fires, of those tornadoes and earthquakes and floods, as well as the destructiveness of so-called choices of people's political choices when they went to vote. So there's this dance of life. There's this mystery of life. The spiritual side of life is a mystery. There is no concreteness. There is no, oh yes, my God is better than your God. Well, some people argue that, but it's one of my favorite sutras from the yogic scriptures is, those who know don't know, and those who don't know, know. Just think about that for a minute. If you're so sure that you know how things should be, you have wrong thinking, because you are so sure that you have become this block of sureness, this irascible kind of irrevocable, rooted, don't move me, I know what's right, and I'm going to go to the streets and demonstrate, which is good. You should express yourself. You shouldn't keep it up inside of you. If you need to release stuff, please go and demonstrate. But that doesn't mean that you're right. And it doesn't mean that the other guy who's in charge now, with the swing of the pendulum, which politics is, it's just the swing of the pendulum. One party this time, one party that time. Next party goes that. Next party undoes that. Next party does that. Next party does even more of that. And the swing, and the swing, and the swing, which is what politics is. It's not something you can trust and rely on. The permanency of life is mysteriously impossible to define. The permanency of life, things that you can really be sure of, lie with your spirituality, how developed, how much trust, the birds, how much energy do you give your spiritual life? How much time do you go into the solitude of connecting to what's within you without the outside influences and the opinions and the swings of the pendulum, the news, and what's happening out there? Now, I'm not saying that we should all be living in a cave, not at all. I do believe 21st century spirituality, and I've said this many times, not only here on Z Lord, but the many podcasts that I'm invited to speak on, because I'm a 5-book published author, and my dearly beloved Carter, who is my co-host for 5 years before he took a sabbatical, he has not ever created a book, but he's a filmmaker, and so his films are about nature and about communing with nature. And my books are about also nature, but a communing with the inside spirit, particularly when we have issues of that negative kind of shadowy side, the questionable side that Jung, the professor, the Dr. Jung of psychotherapy has reminded us is so important to acknowledge, that we all have that dark questioning. Are we right? What are we doing here? I don't know what's going on. And if we don't acknowledge that we have these questions, we can tend to go into the neuroses, which is so easily a part of being human. But it's a matter of choosing. Do we want to work with the higher aspects of our being and, acknowledge that there is a shadow, there is some question, there is always things that need to be brought out of our psyche and allowed to be free however we can, whether it's from a childhood instance or just from, I do believe in reincarnation. I think that we come in to this life with a lot of stuff on our plates, in our souls, in our psyches. That's why they call it psychology, because the psyche is the soul. That stuff that we work on to be happier or not, depending on how we choose to be, is something we come into this existence with. And it's almost like a roulette wheel or a crapshoot. Like, what do we come in with? It's not just because of who your parents were or what sperm and what egg came together in the lab. It has to do with the spirit, the psyche, the soul that we have, that you have, that I have. This is a very important point. The soul that we all have is our connection to the mystery of life. It's our a kind of beckoning to be magical about life, to not just be nuts and bolts and, let's get it done. Let's have this life and let's make it perfect. Well, it's not going to be perfect No matter what you do, it's not going to be perfect. There are always going to be flaws and shadowy things and mysteries and enigmas. And yes, there's going to be epiphanies. And there's going to be, as Oprah calls it, the ahas. There's always going to be the highs and the lows, and the brights and the darks, and the left and the right, and the moon and the sun. There's always going to be what in the spiritual world is called duality. There always is. And the only way to really live peacefully with all these dualities, and of course there's the sexual ones, but I'm not going to get into that because I know for a fact there's not just male and female. There are various and sundries in betweens. I know enough about biology and my own experiences to know that there are in-betweens of sexualities. And more human beings are going to have to accept this and work with it. And as a Native American friend of mine told me years ago, when I asked the Acoma Pueblo out in New Mexico, I asked my dear friend Patush, who is the historian of the Acoma, I said, so Patush, what do you do with the in-betweens who are neither this, neither that? And he said, oh, we just give them the jobs for the in-betweens. They have a place in society. They're not the warriors. They're not necessarily the child bearers, like the males or the females, but they have roles. And he basically said that they are accepted and respected, and they have certain roles that befit their energy level and their natures. So there is a way of us accepting all these amazing changes that we are facing together as a blended family. And change is happening big time. That's why everybody is freaking out. Because like a friend of mine said yesterday, she said, I just want things to go back to normal. Well, I had to tell her, I said, we're never going back to the way things were, because we're in the midst of change, transformation, shifts, some of it good, some of it not so comfortable, but we don't know if it's going to be good or not, because it is happening. And you all know what I'm referring to. I'm not going to mention specifics. The change that society is going through right now, especially in America, is going to be really difficult for a lot of people unless you give more attention to your spirit. Give more attention to that which is within you, not what everybody else is telling you how you should feel and why you should be out on the streets demonstrating, but to spend more time to that, what the Bible calls the still small voice within. That quietness that speaks to you when you shut off your logical brain, that part of your brain, which is only half of it. I mean, scientists have already discovered that we have two separate lobes in our brain. One of them is for the logical thinking, and those are the people who are very, very, very upset right now, who are just in that left side of their brain. And then there's the right side of the brain, which is open to the connectedness of the mystery, the creative, the flow of energy that comes through us, our DNA. I mean, it's just part of our being. And we don't have to shut off one side of our brain to connect to the other side. But if you're a thoroughly left side brained person who only believes in the logic, it would be incumbent upon your wish to be a happier person if you spent more time developing the left side of the brain. I hope I'm getting this right. The left side and the right side. I'm dyslexic, so sometimes I flip things. But let's see, creating on the right side of the brain. Oh, it's the creative side on the right side. I remember from the title of that book. The creative side is the right side. The left side is the logical. And if anybody wants to hear this in a very clearly presented scientific manner, please go see Jill Bolte Taylor's wonderful TED Talk, because she herself was a brain, or is a brain scientist, and had a stroke on the logical side of her brain, which is the left side, totally stroked out. So she fully was immersed in the right side of her brain up until she got rescued by the ambulance and went to the hospital, and then began her many years recovery of using both sides of her brain. But she explains it, so if anyone does not know or believe me, then please do see that wonderful TED Talk. Every time I see that TED Talk, I burst out in tears, because she describes what it's like to be fully in the right side of her brain, because the left had a hemorrhage and it was not functioning. She couldn't even remember her name or telephone number or what was going on. My cat's here. And when she was in that immersion of the right side of her brain, she said, wow, this is amazing. She didn't want to come back, but she said, wait a minute, I'm having a stroke. I got to come back. And so it's an amazing thing when we meditate, for instance. People who meditate understand what I'm talking about. And so when Jill Bolte Taylor was describing being immersed in only the right side of her brain, she was describing what it is like when you practice meditation and you practice shutting off the logical part of your brain, where you have to think out everything and you have to analyze everything and you have to make sure that you've got all the pros and the cons and the facts and and that little voice never shuts up. Everybody knows what that little voice is. It's like our demon inside. And sometimes it really disturbs people and it makes them nuts. But we can go into the peacefulness of not having the logic be so loud, and go into the immersion of oneness, which is described by Dr. Taylor so wonderfly as the function. That's the purpose of the right side of the brain. That's where our creative energies are. That's where our higher thinking is, that is going to bring us into this spiraling evolutionary part of our humanness, which I call, and I write about it in my book, Hybrid Vigor, I call the transformation and the choice of deciding to change from plain old Homo sapiens, all knowing, all whatever, into Homo spiritus, which is embracing our spirit, as well as the other aspects of our being. What a wonderful choice to have, instead of thinking, who am I going to vote for to get, that bastard out of office? And well, there's other things we can do. We can nurture our spirit. We can nurture our creativity. We can nurture that interconnectedness, which still allows us to do things like raise our family, go to work, drive our cars. But we have with us that complete acceptance that the whole brainness of our humanity has brought us by going and exploring that part of our brain that is connected to all. And by all, I mean all that is, every single aspect of this whole shebang, which is endless. It just goes on infinitely. We are all connected to that energy, that force, that source, And it's all within us. We are microcosms of this hugeness, which is the macrocosm. We are little cells within the body of the divine, the sacred. Call it God. Call it the One. The more we explore this idea, we realize it is not just an idea. It is the reality of our existence as humans. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And the more you meditate, shutting off that logical part of your brain that has to know everything, every single answer and every single solution, the more you take the time to shut off that never-ending gnawing little mouse and go into that vastness of accepting the magics and the mystery and the unknowable, the enigma, then you will be a happier person, because it's okay not to know. It's okay to not be so sure that you know. Those who know don't know, and those who don't know. I hope this was useful, and I really enjoy sharing with you, because it's important for me to offer comfort at this time, at this very challenging time in our human culture. And this seems to be a golden opportunity for me to do podcasting, to speak one-on-one with your heart, from my heart. It's a wonderful opportunity for me. And if you want to know more about meditation, I do put up mind stillers, little videos that help reach that place within on my YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and type in my name. There's a Z in teZa. Don't forget, I'm not teZa, I'm teZa. Now see? I have my own little peculiarities too. So I wish you a blessed moment and day and week until I see you next time. Om Namah Shivaya.